are we going to have this fight eventually, even the same fight they were having back in 1600? Now, we may not be burning people at the stake today, but metaphorically we still do. So are we still in that same boat where we're going to have to answer some deep religious questions?
No, I think what happens now is obviously on social media, people are getting cancelled sometimes, or there is a lot of negativity, toxicity against even scientists that deviate from the beaten path. I'm trying to consider possibilities that other scientists find really controversial and difficult to believe. But the point is, science is not about belief. It's about collecting data and evidence that will convince all of us. And the only way to avoid that is by adopting the approach of the Vatican. When Galileo Galilei observed the moons to Jupiter through his telescope and realized that not everything revolves around the Earth, the Vatican said, you will not be able to communicate that to the public. They put him in house arrest. And the mistake they made was not to say, oh, we have more money than you do, we will build a bigger telescope and prove you wrong. Because if they were to do that, they would have realized that he's right. And that they would have corrected course very quickly. Instead, what they did was 350 years after he died, they made an announcement in 1992 that he was correct. So that was really embarrassing for the Vatican. But you can now say that in retrospect, the lesson is that, even if you don't believe something, as long as you try to collect data to disprove it. So if my colleagues, for example, do not like what I say and they want to show beyond any reasonable doubt that the 3i Atlas must be a comet, that's great, because they will collect a lot of data, and if it's not a comet, they won't be able to shove it under the carpet of traditional thinking, because all these anomalies will be there. The only way to maintain our ignorance is not to collect data. So, for example, in the context of UAP, for many years, we had to just rely on what the government tells us. But now the Galileo project is collecting its own data. We don't need the government to tell us what our cameras are seeing, because if there is something extraterrestrial, we'll be able to tell. Anything terrestrial, anything human-made, is boring as far as I'm concerned. I don't care about it. But the point is that with data, if you collect it, eventually everyone would agree to it, because it's impossible to ignore it. And so my hope is that with 3i Atlas, if it turns out that the object maneuvers, if it looks like technological, it would be crazy for anyone not to accept that. What may happen is that all these scientists that now say, it's nonsense and we shouldn't even consider that possibility, after this possibility is realized, they would argue, oh, we thought about it before. It's not the first time that someone suggested that. And in fact, we were quite aware of that possibility. And there is nothing really new about it. And in fact, we were discussing it a long time. Other people were discussing it. There is nothing new. And, that's human nature. I don't care about it. I don't care about what people say and how popular an idea is. Whether if we have a neighbor, it doesn't really matter what we say to our family. We can say we don't have a neighbor, but the neighbor will still be out there. In just the same way that the Earth continued to move around the sun for 4.5 billion years, irrespective of what the Vatican said.
Yeah, and we do get questions about that. We had one, and you're answering some of that, which was questions we get commonly about Avi Loeb is, your peers in astronomy. Why do they not appear to be taking it as serious as you are? Is there just a lack of interest in the data collection?
No, it's
Is there a lack of curiosity, or?
Yeah, I would argue it's a lack of curiosity. That's reason number one, because experts, and in particular comet experts, they have their self-esteem and their recognition, their stature, professional status based on past knowledge. So they have been for decades monitoring rocks in the sky, and they would not take the risk of considering anything other than icy rocks. Even when Oumuamua did not look like any of the icy rocks we saw in the solar system, they called it a dark comet, meaning it's a comet where the cometary tail is invisible, which is very much like the story of Hans Christian Andersen, where the adults in the room say the emperor has clothes, you just can't see them, they're invisible, they say to the kid, even though the emperor is completely naked. And so that is the tendency of experts to always argue, oh, if you can't see something that we expect, then it must be invisible to you, but it exists. So they call Oumuamua a dark comet. That will be the approach until you have so much data that they cannot insist on that. And so that's one reason that experts subscribe to past knowledge, because their own self worth is based on that. They created echo chambers that just say the same thing again and again and again. And if you are challenging that, you are putting it at risk. The second aspect is that the public cares a lot about what I say. There were I didn't do any outreach to reporters. They just reported about my work, and the subject became viral. Right. And then what happens is all these people who are bloggers or YouTubers, they put all their time in getting as popular as they can with their audience. They suddenly see me becoming popular, and they are jealous about it. And that includes some of my colleagues in academia, and they're just jealous of the attention that it gets.